Welcome to History 404.
All of us know about colonialism,
It's been drilled into the American curriculum.
but what we don't know much about is how society fails to resist this.
It's often boiled down to a superior technology.
But that's not the whole story, not by far. Technology plays a critical role, but there's so much more neglected if we accept that narrative. It creates a dangerous historical misunderstanding if we only focus on the consequences and not the causes.
So, what are those other factors that you're speaking of?
For example, in Africa, the Kingdom of the Congo was wealthy beyond belief due to its relationship with the Portuguese. Portugal was hungry for slaves to feed its plantations, and the Congolese hunted nearby tribes to turn them into slaves to sell to the Portuguese.
Oh, so what happened?
The monarchy fell into civil conflict, as monarchies do after leaving no heir, and the country went into decline. This chaotic period sapped the kingdom's strength to resist colonialism, and banditry soon became commonplace, and territories became subjugated by the Portuguese.
Oh, wow.
Of course, technology still had a role. The British conquered the Zulu with modern firepower, such as machine guns and rifles against spears and shields. The Zulu, on their part, subjugated other tribes through military innovation.
So, the lack of better technology and inability to adapt to changing times were just the symptoms of imperial decline.
There are more reasons for the success of colonialism. The Mughal Empire in India could freely drive Europeans off of its continent, and deployment of rockets against British soldiers would inspire the development of Britain's own Congreve rocket. In short, the Mughals were more technologically advanced than the British, and the British adopted Mughal technology. However, after the death of Aurangzeb, who overextended the empire through his conquests, the empire slowly started to fall apart with his sons fighting each other, and culminated in the Persian sack of Delhi. From there, the British were free to divide and conquer this weak India.
Right. Colonialism is a complex story, and our curriculum only goes into the effects of society and not its causes.
We'll look at a different story of colonialism today, China.
Eastern philosophy has been very popularized within Western media. Western philosophers promote individualism and curiosity, while Chinese philosophers, in particular, promote acceptance of one's role in society. This is the idea of he, or harmony and balance.
This comes hand in hand with Chinese politics. Early history was dominated by early states capable of raising immense armies and incredibly powerful. This was necessary for states to survive during the chaotic warring states periods after the Zhou and Xia dynasties before the first emperor.
Ethnicities play a very important role in loyalty. Qin Shi Huang, or Shi Huangdi of Qin, was the first person to implement standardized measures and language. And generally, this ensured that the conquered people would be assimilated into the Han culture and be loyal, as they would have a sense of belonging.
The government was very wealthy, with a strong civilization of bountiful resources in farmland, metals, and prized luxury goods. Most of the world fought over control of trade routes and tried to find new ways to trade with this faraway neighbor and highly desired goods like silk and porcelain.
Right, and the government was absolutely powerful, and it's the most prestigious job that a person could get was to be a civil servant to the emperor.
This led to political complacency. For instance, the Ming voyage of Zheng He, he traveled all the way to Africa, but it wasn't for any exploration, but instead to sort of show off China's wealth and gain new vassals.
The last dynasty, the Qing, knew about advanced technology but shunned it. What was technology to 1,000 years of harmony and imperial rule?
This obviously led to the decline of the Qing. and resulted in a period of weakness and distrust in the government. Though the government purchased technology from Western powers and had a fleet that could rival Japan's, the will of the people showed itself as unwilling to defend the Qing, as the Qing were Manchu and not Han. People did try to resist for themselves, creating the Boxing movement and Taiping Tianguo, the Heavenly Kingdom, out of dissatisfaction, but these failed because of their radical views.
The government, though it purchased technology, did not engage in any political reform. The emperors, particularly Empress Dowager Cixi, were set on maintaining their own power and so refused to yield any power to the Han people. They would rather give resources to Westerners than power to other Chinese. The time was ripe for a rebellion, and Sun Yat-sen tried to start an armed uprising against the Qing government, with the intention of creating a Chinese republic where all could live. This succeeded after many tries, but soon the government was locked in a stalemate with the Qing. Eventually, they formed a compromise which ended this 1911 revolution, or the Xinhai Geming, or Xinhai Revolution. So what was the compromise?
The Qing general Yuan Shikai, who governed the largest and most modern army of the Qing, would get the presidency of the new Republic of China. Sun would retire from politics, and he had put country over self, and his dream of a Chinese republic was achieved.
Until this new general tried to give himself the title of emperor, a move which resulted in political pressure and a second revolution against him, he failed and died in disgrace after his ailing health.
But this only added to the mess that was there, and thus China entered the warlord era, a setup for failure of the Nationalist Party, Kuomintang, which had originally launched the revolution.
Despite these setbacks, times were mostly optimistic. Many educated people that would become officials, such as Mao, Chairman Mao, were willing to support the Kuomintang against the sea of warlords that divided China. This culminated in the Northern Expedition and the First United Front, where the Communist Party and Nationalist Party joined together to unify China.
This succeeded at first, but there was still much work to do. The Qing had placed... This succeeded at first, but there was still much work to do. The Qing had experienced internal fracturing prior to its collapse. So many warlords and governors controlled vast parts of their country. Some had larger armies than even the central government that they had pledged their allegiance to.
And many foreign powers continued to take advantage of this weak China. Japan, in particular, kept on demanding resources and land, while the central government couldn't do anything to resist this.
The Kuomintang had its own split to deal with, as warlord Yan Xishan and others invaded the central government to establish their own sphere, effectively creating another civil war. After this was dealt with, the left and right elements of the party split in Wuhan and Nanjing, respectively, threatening the stability of the state even more. These two formed a fragile alliance to counter a growing warlord in the south, Li Zhongrun.
At this point, Sun Yat-sen had died and was succeeded by Jiang Jieshi, who was a vehement anti-communist. He declared that he would rather kill 1,000 innocents than let one communist slip away, a move which generated dissatisfaction against many others and sympathy for the communists.
Here the communists are still a minor force, like a fly in the face of the central government. Jiang tried again and again to kill them, eventually almost succeeding after the Fifth Encirclement Campaign, which forced the communists to run to Shanxi province, a retreat which cost them 9 out of 10 followers.
Now, it is very easy to see how the West could maintain concessions, especially those in large cities like Wuhan and Shanghai. Effectively, the central government could not make any change to the situation regarding foreign imperialism compared to the Qing.
There's no one to really blame here, however. Jiang is in an extremely tight position, and he can't easily unify the warlords and integrate China, creating a unified state. Remember, some warlords have even larger armies than he does.
However, even after destroying the communists and also defeating the upstart warlord Li Zhongleng in the southern Guangxi province, he would also have been on a slow unification of China.
Despite all this political fracturing, China underwent a small golden decade under the central government's leadership after the quote-unquote unification from the Northern Expedition. Warlords and governors were building up their provinces, albeit for selfish reasons, and China's economy, railway, and industry all started to grow. It was called the Nanjing Decade.
Then again, golden is a subjective term. It was good for a country just emerging from almost anarchy, but development could have progressed even further under real government.
Right.
It was certainly not easy for Jiang to maneuver politically or militarily in this carefully balanced state. Adding on to this, the Japanese suddenly invaded Manchuria and established a puppet government there, brazenly setting up a colony.
And of course, Jiang couldn't do anything about it. In southern China, there was a warlord and imminent civil war again.
But the Japanese Marco Polo Bridge, or Lu Gouqiao incident, soon changed that.
The Japanese were hated for a long time as foreign occupiers and a colonial power, and the invasion only galvanized support for a defensive war. The aggression was a tipping point, and all warlords and governments were called into action. Jiang was kidnapped in Xi'an into working with the communists once again to fight the Japanese.
This was really great for the communists, as the national government would have to deal with the brunt of Japan's military force, while the communists could just build up most of its forces and support behind the nationalist back. It did send several armies to fight the Japanese, but concentrated its efforts on rebuilding mostly.
Right, and adding on, the nationalists had a heavy corruption problem, with Jiang's own wife embezzling hundreds of millions of US dollars for personal gains, and with many other businessmen such as TV Song and H.H. Kung doing the same. This deprived the Republic of China of key aid that would have been vital for resisting the Japanese invasion in guns, factories, and equipment. Jiang's unwillingness to prepare for war with the Japanese further drained the fighting ability of nationalist China as he pursued the communists. Further, military organization based on loyalty and not merit sapped the potential strength of the officer corps.
Oh wow, now looking back at this part of the history is so messed up and confusing.
Yes, but it is very interesting, though complex, and many are not really educated about this period of time. And since time is almost up, should we sum it up?
Sure.
Right, so this is the end of the podcast. China's political system, where the people feared the officials feared the foreigners, and the foreigners feared the people, created a very weak resistance to colonialism, as foreigners could essentially control the government who controlled the people. The people would attempt to rise up against colonialism, but couldn't do so under essentially a foreign government. And China later broke up and fell into civil wars, further depleting the strength to resist colonialism.
Right, and that is it. Hope you guys enjoyed it. And I gotta go do my capitalist stuff now.
For real.